Let's begin.
Hey there, scary story fanatics. Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. Looks like we've reached the end of the road, or the beginning of the end at least. Tonight, we begin a 3-part story that will bring closure to the Locust Lake series. So, sit back, relax, and get ready for more revelations than you can handle. It's time for Doughboy420's Locust Lake, Something Wicked.
I've studied Locust Lake and the surrounding regions for close to 2 decades, and I've come to the conclusion that these things, these locusts, as the cult calls them, they were once human, but are no longer. I believe them to be something different now, something darker, something more ancient. I believe them to be demons sent here from the void. Ever since that fateful day, centuries ago, when that young native girl was violated and murdered, and her mother went on a vengeful rampage, everything became tainted with evil, pure evil. I believe the lake is creating a new darkness every so often and unleashing it upon the surrounding area, like locusts born to destroy, only to disappear once more. I believe the lake is manifesting physical incarnations of sin. Each of the 7 deadly sins has been represented. The lake itself is a pool of evil, like a being unto itself. It births these devils into the world. It does nothing more. It simply exists to create darkness. It does nothing. It is sloth. Akenefti Oniga, the woman of the water, a twisted being born from the daughter's fear and pain, and the mother's anguish and rage, a being that was created through a single wretched act of lust. The Redcoat, a former British soldier that fought against what would become the United States in the Revolutionary War. A man of honor and integrity, but a man that ultimately gave in to his need to survive. He was promised a way out of his nightmare if he just gave in to his need for food, and he did. He killed and ate his brothers in arms in order to continue his life, and just as he was promised, the woman in the water saved him from his nightmare, while eternally damning him to another, always hungry, always needing his feast. A glutton. Casper Stoical, a deformed and mentally handicapped orphan born in the early part of the 20th century, abandoned by his parents at an orphanage near to the lake and left to be raised by strict Catholic nuns. One in particular took a fondness to him, and it is her last name that he was given. However, she wasn't a very good mother to him, and she killed him accidentally while trying to baptize the demons out of him in the lake. But instead, she allowed the demons in the dark waters of the lake to enter the boy's lungs, drowning him in darkness. A poor child that only ever wanted to be loved. He was teased and taunted by the other children, and he was then murdered by the only mother he knew. He wished he could be someone else, anyone else. He was envious. Jacob Treagle was an alright kid, not very different from any other child. He loved to play video games and watch TV, a fairly typical child of the 80s, and he was taunted endlessly by bullies. Terrible kids that treated him like dirt, filling him with so much pain and rage. They acted so horribly to him, in fact, that they ended up turning him into the monster that he is now when they trapped him in the trunk of a car. A car that then caught fire due to an accident, burning the poor boy alive. So much pain. So much anger. Dr. Clark, one of the newer devils to be twisted by the lake. She was a psychologist that sought to study the survivors of the various massacres birthed by the lake, falsely believing that the culprit of the murders was Todd Jacobs, a man who had been put to death for the murders that he did not commit. Sarah Clark was unaware that she had a mental impairment. It's believed that she had a dormant form of dissociative identity disorder, where a separate personality could take control of her body without her even being aware of it. It would have been harmless. She would have gone on living her daily life and probably would have never have had a problem, had it not been agitated by the darkness of Locust Lake. Hakenifty Oniga was able to oppress her, suggesting that she open up to the evil within her, and that is what she did. Eventually, Sarah Clark was no more, and Dr. Clark was all that remained. The demons of the lake made sure that she would return as a semi-corporeal monster. She was sure that she could fix them. She was sure that she could help them, that only she could do it. She was far too prideful. Amadeus Shaw was a kind old man, the owner of a local toy store north of Locust Lake. Everyone believed him to be a harmless old man, but it turned out that he was a madman. He believed that Locust Lake was the key to immortality, and when the county took away custody of his first child, he decided to make a change, not for himself, but for the world. The world had to change, and he would make it change. Amadeus taught the secrets of the locusts to those who would listen. He recruited as many people as he could, top members of society, a reverend, a good lawyer, the mayor of the town nearby to Locust Lake, people that could help him change society. He even had another child in the process, a daughter whom he would raise to be devout in their beliefs. Eventually, the cult of locusts would enact their plan and sacrifice a virgin, and Amadeus Shaw would achieve transcendence, becoming a living god. But the lake does not give. It only takes, and its gifts are tainted with darkness. So Amadeus Shaw's body died on the spot, but his spirit was transferred into the nearest body, a bloody, old marionette. He sought power and immortality at any cost, and you know the old saying, be careful what you wish for. His gift ended up being a curse, and he would now live forever as a puppet of the lake, a victim of his own greed. Any one of them alone is a formidable blemish upon existence, but together they are sin given life. Together they are evil at its purest form, and I fear that together they are making way for something much, much worse than anyone could ever possibly comprehend. I found an old journal written by Todd Jacobs. It chronicles dozens of stories from survivors of the lake. The man wasn't a killer. He was trying to stop the killings. The book is filled with theories and old maps and drawings, and with it, various stories and writings from the previously mentioned cult of locusts, which I'm sure you've heard about. I believe I have a plan to end them once and for all. We need to stop them before it's too late. I urge you to come to the lake so that we can end this now and for good. Sincerely, Gunnar Walden. The man in his 60s stuffed the letter into an envelope, pushed his long platinum hair behind his ear, and licked the envelope before sealing it closed. The man gathered up his belongings, locked the door tightly behind him, and left to deliver his request upon a doorstep. It was one of 5 that he had delivered to various people of interest. He gripped the old, smooth bone fragment tied with a small rope around his neck to form a necklace. It was a good luck charm, and he prayed that he would be able to finally end all of this. He then began heading north from his home, along Harmony Creek, toward this once again closed down Forest Trails State Park, formerly known as just the gosh darn camp, which was in turn formerly known as Locust Lake. The sky overhead was dark and dismal. Not a bit of blue was able to poke out between the thick, black cumulonimbus clouds. It had been raining on and off for weeks now, and after the late winter thaw, there was a decent amount of flooding and mud in much of northern Pennsylvania. Several roads along the way had been flooded out, making them impassable, even for Gunnar's Jeep, and he began to fear that the only 2 roads that lead to the lake would be also impassable. With it being low land on one side and there being a small, 1-lane bridge on the other, he was right to be fearful. But luckily, there was only about 6 or 7 inches of water upon the road that he chose to take, giving him more than enough clearance through the water to make it to the other side, where he could turn to head to where Locust Lake could be found. He eventually came to a dirt road that branched off of the one that he was on, and there, in some overgrown brush, was an unkept wooden sign. The letters could barely be seen behind all the graffiti. "This way to Forest Trails State Park" was printed over the familiar sign of a state symbol of the Keystone. However, the words were obscured by years of spray paint. Your typical skulls and renditions of male genitalia could be seen hidden behind the leaves. But the bit that stood out the most was how Forest Trails State Park was crossed out in red, and the single word of hell was painted beneath in the same crimson hue. It wasn't very original, but it was absolutely accurate. The road was extremely bumpy, long disused since it was last driven upon, and was filled with deep ruts where vehicles had entered illegally and tore up the muddy path. Every soul that had once lived along the road near Locust Lake had either moved away or was now long dead, victims of the location upon which they resided. Gunnar passed by houses in disrepair, doors hanging off hinges, and windows smashed out. The grass was overgrown all around, and the smell of musty animal urine lingered in the air, causing Gunnar to roll up his windows to avoid the stench. Animals had surely sought refuge in these abandoned shelters, and Gunnar didn't know what he would find inside of them. But that was not his destination. He was going to the lake up the road. Locust Lake. The curse of Pennsylvania. Mr. Walden finally rounded the corner, off of the road and onto the trail that led up to the lake. It was now nothing more than a muddy path, barely visible with overgrown brush nearby covering it from either side. Gunnar came prepared, though. He put his Jeep into gear and pushed forward through the brush, his tires digging into the mud as he passed through. His Jeep fought its way upward before finally giving way to a bit of a clearing where the old sign for Forest Trails State Park could be seen. It was now hanging from just a couple of nails on one end, gently swaying from side to side in the wind. Its letters could barely be seen behind the familiar red spray paint of the word hell. Along with this was spray paint in different handwriting that was painted onto the wooden beam that held the sign above the road. "Welcome to Camp Death," it said. obviously attempting to mimic the look of running blood with its lettering. Gunnar looked around as the sky gave way, and a light rain began to fall once more, adding to the terrible road conditions ahead. He slowly lurched his jeep across the rickety, old wooden bridge that was in a shape of great disrepair. He feared that his tires would fall through the rotting wood at any moment, but it was luckily able to make it across the gap of the raging stream that was mere inches below its surface, emptying into a flooding lake. The cabins scattered around the area were all in terrible condition. Some of them were just missing doors or had broken windows, while others had entirely collapsed walls or caved-in roofs. There was also moss and foliage that grew on and into some of the buildings, making them inaccessible. Gunnar pulled his truck up and parked next to what was once the main office and welcome center of Forest Trail State Park. The building was one of the ones that was in better condition, and it felt like a good place to set up camp and wait for those he sent for to show up. He was sure that they would show, and he was sure that if he just didn't draw any attention to himself, no fires, no noise, he would be able to go unnoticed by the things that lurked there long enough for his friends to arrive. He gripped his necklace once more and hoped that that would be the case. He didn't have to worry about his jeep giving away his position. No one came around here anymore, and those that did usually didn't leave, meaning that his jeep was just one of nearly a dozen other vehicles that had been abandoned there by lost souls long dead. Heaps of metal, rusting away over the years. It blended right in. The place was a graveyard. No one but thrill-seekers and stoned teenagers dared to enter there. Not even the police would go near there anymore. It was like a decaying ghost town in the forest. A place that everyone tried desperately to forget. Gunnar had settled down in the main building when he heard a vehicle pull into camp, rap music thumping loudly from inside. What the hell? Are they crazy? Gunnar said to himself as he looked out the half-boarded-up window to find a fairly new-looking truck, half covered in mud, packed full of teenagers in the front and back seats, along with a couple more riding in the bed. The teens piled out of the truck, music still blaring, some of them carrying cases of beer, while others carried bottles and other such paraphernalia. One of them even lugged along a 3-foot-tall glass water bong. There were 8 of them altogether, 3 girls and 5 boys, all of them coming out for a good time. But they wouldn't find it here. Stupid kids are going to get themselves killed, Gunnar said quietly to himself, not really knowing what to do, before eventually coming to the conclusion that he should probably try to drive those kids away from the area. Hey! You kids shouldn't be here! Gunnar warned them as he approached the pavilion that they stood under.
Whoa. Hey, dude, we just trying to have some fun.
A young African-American boy spoke. He was probably no older than 17. You should go have your fun somewhere else. This place isn't safe, Gunnar informed them. Why? Because of ghost stories? Casper Stoical gonna show up and cut me to pieces? Some whack job in a wooden mask gonna cut my head off? A white boy with light brown hair and bright blue eyes spoke up with a chuckle. Yeah, right. Go back to your old folks' home, old man, he joked, getting a laugh out of a couple of the other dumb teens. Laugh now. If you stay here, you won't be laughing long, Gunnar said.
Move along, old dude. We'll be all right.
A blonde, young woman spoke up with an attitude of affluence. Don't say I didn't warn you. Gunnar spoke as he walked away, gripping his necklace tightly. He didn't want any trouble, and he didn't exactly want to be caught around a bunch of kids when shit hit the fan either. See you later, Gramps! The second boy spoke again as Gunnar left the area. Gunnar returned to his cabin in hopes that things wouldn't go downhill before those that he had invited had even arrived. and it wasn't too long after Gunner had taken a seat that a large 4x4 truck pulled into the camp near to where the cabin was staying. The first to arrive was Cole Kaiser, the brother of Ken Kaiser, who had been killed by the lake many years ago. His brother was a military fanatic that was once discharged, but Cole, on the other hand, remained in the service and actually became a very decorated soldier after decades on the front lines of various battles across the globe. Cole had much the same response upon seeing the teens partying only a few cabins away.
Stupid kids,
he mumbled to himself before being invited into the office with Gunner.
What the hell are those kids doing here? Don't they know anything?
Cole questioned. They just showed up just before you did. I tried to get rid of them, but they mocked me, so I left them to their own devices and hoped for the best. But you and I both know that things could quickly turn south here, Gunner replied. The two of them were then interrupted by yet even more loud music as another car pulled into the camp. They originally thought it to be more drunk teens, but instead they saw a woman by the name of Lillian. She was the one that had actually gotten in touch with Gunner after hearing about his interest in Locust Lake. She was a survivor of one of the countless massacres at the lake. Lillian usually kept to herself, but she told Gunner of the night that she lost her friends and boyfriend at the lake, and how nothing had been the same for her since. But she was tired of running. She told him that she wanted to put an end to the madness of Locust Lake. "Turn that music off!" Gunner spoke up to her as she got out of her car, getting a lot of loud, drunken cheers from the partygoers a few cabins down, as they cheered for the kindred spirit that enjoyed the same music. Lillian, who had dyed her hair a purple color, waved back at them. Her leather jacket, too long for her arms, slipped down her wrist to reveal the dark ink of a tattoo on her wrist.
"Sorry, Gunner,"
Lillian said as she turned off her car, thus ending the music.
Are you trying to get us all killed?
Cole grumbled.
"Ugh, sorry, man."
Lillian said, offended, getting a scoff from Cole.
"Like, what's with the kids? Don't they know, this place is dangerous?"
She then asked. I tried to get rid of them, but they wouldn't go. I didn't want to be around them when they attract unwanted attention, Gunner replied. It was then that a girl's scream rang out from the direction of the partying teens, causing the three of them to pause.
"Well, speak as a devil,"
Lillian said, before rushing outside to see what the commotion was, followed by Cole and Gunner soon after. They found the teens all safe and sound, but with one new addition to their group.
"Look at this little dude, guys,"
one of the girls said, drunkenly, holding up this creepy-looking old puppet. And she stated that she had found him in one of the cabins, motioning towards a nearby building with the carved wooden doll in her hands. You should put that down," Gunner said, recognizing the figure in her hands as the marionette that went missing after the Cult of Locusts incident. The very same marionette in which he believed held the spirit of the demented cult leader, Amadeus Shaw.
"Why, it's just a little doll. You afraid I'm gonna break it, old man?"
the girl said. No, just put it down and get the hell out of here, Gunner yelled.
"Oh,"
the girl exclaimed, motioning as if she was going to drop the marionette.
"Uh-oh, I'm gonna drop it,"
she joked, pretending to almost drop the puppet once more. She nearly dropped him a third time when she suddenly stopped and began shaking a bit before falling over onto the ground, convulsing with a pair of needle-nosed pliers lodged deeply into her left eye socket, blood gushing forth from the wound as she thrashed about in the dirt. "Oh my God, Elena!" yelled the young, blue-eyed boy that had hassled Gunner earlier. Then all hell broke loose upon the camp as evil descended upon them from every side. The giant beast of a man with a black stitchwork mask appeared from the dreary shadows of the forest, an old farming sickle in hand. The sickle so rusted that jagged holes had formed, oxidization eating away through the metal. The sickle would then be buried into the spine of the blue-eyed boy as he attempted to flee, ripping his body like a jagged toothed saw, rusty hook-like sections cutting through his body with ease. Then emerged from the forest several more figures. A tall man in a wooden mask, carrying a jagged and rusty, broken-off end of a pole saw that was similar in condition to the sickle lodged into the back of the teen boy. Jacob Treagle lumbered out of the woods, advancing towards the teens that now fled every which way. As the monster advanced, another devil appeared. The rotting, corpse-like figure of a woman lurched forward from the trees, her jaw hanging unnaturally from a decayed face that stuck up out of dirty, old office attire. It was the demon doctor, Dr. Clark. Several of the remaining teens piled into their truck and took off as fast as they could, while the remainder of them attempted to seek refuge with the group of older people that had come to the lake on a mission. But they too filed into Cole's truck in order to escape so that they could regroup. The 2 truckloads of people took off down the hill in an attempt to flee from the horror of the lake, but they were not going to be that lucky. At the bottom of the hill, they first attempted to turn right, but were soon met by a collapsed bridge that had been destroyed by the recent floodwaters. The remainder of the bridge was now scattered along the river's edge for a good 20 or so feet, where it had once stood, along with several bushes and other flood debris that had gotten hung up on the bridge. The 2 groups then turned around in an attempt to escape in the other direction, but that too was a no-go. They found that the floodwaters had arisen in the nearby valley, through which the road traveled. The nearby river was fed from Locust Lake, and was now flooded long beyond its normal size, enough to cover the road with several feet of murky brown water. Cole figured that his truck could probably make it through the overflow, so he attempted to push forward. The truck was large and stuck out of the water pretty well, and it looked as though they were going to make it through safely. Then a chorus of screams broke out from the back of the truck, where Cole looked over his shoulder to see a long, muddy arm reach up out of the water. He couldn't see who or what the arm belonged to in the murkiness of the water, but he could see the hand connect with the face of one of the boys in the truck's bed. Fingers dug into the boy's eyes, popping them in his head, the thumb working its way into the boy's screaming mouth, where it dug into the roof of his mouth. Finally, the hand pulled back with such force that the frontal part of the boy's skull was ripped from his body, leaving a faceless corpse, still making a gurgling, screaming sound in the truck before the body toppled over into the muddy waters. Even Cole screamed in fear upon seeing such a thing, and he slammed on the gas in an attempt to get across. But the truck was then thrown backwards onto its side, outside of the water, sending them back from where they had come from, and launching several terrified people onto the wet pavement of the road.
Oh my god, what the fuck was that?
A blonde girl in a halter top said, after climbing to her feet.
I don't know, sis. That was insane. There's nothing there. Where did that come from?
The girl's brother spoke.
Shit, what the hell was that?
Cole asked as he crawled out of the truck. The truck full of teens sat behind Cole's overturned truck, all of them completely dumbfounded by what they had just seen. I think that was Nifty Oniga, Gunner said, as he too climbed out of the overturned vehicle.
Who?
Asked Cole. We should probably find shelter. We don't want to be out in the open, Gunner said.
Wait, like, who the hell is Akongia?
Lillian asked. Nifty Oniga, the woman of the water. I'll tell you more, but first let's get inside, Gunner said, before informing the truckload of teens behind them that they were going to hide out in one of the old houses nearby, right at the bottom of the hill that led to Locust Lake. After checking the musty, old building for wildlife from top to bottom, they were assured that it was the safest possible place for the time being, and locked it up the best that they could, pushing dirty furniture in front of doors and what windows they could to barricade themselves inside and keep any dark forces outside.
Hey man,
The African-American teen spoke to Gunner.
I heard you talking about something outside. What was that thing in the water?
He questioned. That was Akenefti Oniga, the woman of the water. All this started hundreds of years ago when a native girl was murdered in the lake. Her mother lost her mind with grief. It cursed the lake, and ever since then, there's been a constant flow of death at Locust Lake. Gunner replied.
But we weren't at the lake. How did she get us down here?
The teen asked. It would appear as though it's not just the lake, but the water itself on this entire mountain. Her darkness has seeped into the groundwater. Gunner answered.
So, what do we do?
Well, I haven't exactly thought of that yet, but I have some ideas, Gunner said, plotting something.
Well, if we're going to survive this together, we should probably introduce ourselves.
One of the teen boys spoke up. He was wearing a green button-up shirt that was open to show a light gray shirt beneath, over blue jeans. His hair was a dirty blonde color, but probably closer to light brown than blonde, and his eyes were hazel-colored.
I'm Seth, and that's my sister Makenzie.
The boy added.
Hey.
Makenzie, the blonde girl in the halter top, waved at them.
I'm Jack.
The African-American boy said. He was wearing a white shirt that was now stained with his friend's blood. I'm Luke, and that's Jenna. Another boy spoke up with a shaky voice. Colin was her boyfriend. He was the guy in the truck back there, he added, tucking his hands tightly into the pockets of his black jeans. Leda and Matt were the two back at the camp, Josh said quietly. I'm sorry about your friends. Gunner offered his condolences. My name is Gunner. He introduced himself, his fingers nervously rubbing over the soft, bone necklace around his neck.
I'm Cole,
The large, muscular man said.
Lillian.
The woman with dyed hair said, raising her hand for a wave. I've been studying this land for quite some time, Gunner said. We're here to put an end to the evil that infests the area. He added.
Yeah, my brother died here. I don't want to make sure that doesn't happen to anyone else.
Cole spoke up.
My friends were all killed here.
Lillian added.
Wait, you guys all knew that this could happen and you came here anyway?
Jack asked.
Yep, sounds pretty crazy, doesn't it?
Lillian joked. I warned you kids. Sorry. Gunner spoke.
We heard about all the stories, but we figured it was just that. Scary campfire stories. I guess we should have known better.
Jack said, admitting their fault.
So, what are we gonna do?
Makenzie asked. Well, all of you are welcome to stay here. Hopefully our other two guests will be here soon. Maybe they can find us a way out of here, Gunner said.
And what if they don't?
Seth asked. Well, if you want to get out of here, we're going to have to go over that mountain and down the old logging road on the other side. But even then, there's no telling how much flooding is down there, Gunner answered.
Do you think we can make it?
Makenzie asked.
Probably not all of us.
Cole answered.
Wait, you guys said you came here to put an end to this. How?
Seth asked. Well, Gunner began, pulling out an old, worn notebook. The kind that was a hardcover and has a pattern that looks like black and white TV static. I found this journal stuck between some books in a local library. At first, I thought it was some random misplaced notebook. But then I got to reading it and it turned out to be Todd Jacobs' journal. The very same one that supposedly killed dozens of people here. Gunner continued, flipping open the beat-up notebook to reveal several pages of stories, all written meticulously in extremely small print. Sentences stuffed one on top of another, sandwiched two per line, along with notes in the margins at the side. It's filled with dozens of eyewitness accounts of murders that happened here, but it wasn't Todd that killed them. He was an innocent man, executed to cover up the real darkness here, Gunner added. It's also full of GPS coordinates, sketches of places, and some of the demons here, and lots of ideas of how to put a stop to the curse on Locust Lake," he added, flipping through pages upon pages of words. There were pages of numbers mixed in, and some black ink sketches were illustrated randomly throughout its length. Gunnar absent-mindedly gripped his necklace as he held the book on the table. Unfortunately, their plans were cut short when an ethereal presence began to manifest itself in the hallway. The shadowy figure of a decaying woman stood in the hall, gazing upon the victims before her, without them even realizing it. Her jaw hung from her face, and her eyes were clouded over in a hazy white. By the time anyone realized that they were being watched, it was too late. Dr. Clark lunged forward onto Luke as he passed by her. The boy screamed in fear as she gripped him about the throat with one hand, the other extending a long index finger to push deeply into the boy's left eye, digging around and forcing it through his orbital bones with a crunch before piercing his brain, essentially giving the boy a lobotomy with her bare hands. Luke's screams turned into drooling gurgles as she lifted the contents of his brain before dropping him onto the floor. The entire house erupted into a frenzy of screams as the decaying doctor then turned her attention to the nearest living person to her, which was Jenna. The maniacal doctor fell onto the poor girl, drooling a mixture of saliva and coagulated blood from her torn, open cheek and hanging jaw. The girl struggled against the decaying woman on top of her and did her best to fight her off. By this time, the rest of the group were running to the poor girl's aid, but the woman before them held a supernatural strength, and those that attempted to pull her off of Jenna were just thrown away like they were nothing. Jenna was losing strength, and she feared that her time had come. She was about to die, but she didn't want to die here, not in some old junk house. She looked at the crucifixes hanging upon the wall and found herself praying for help. It was at this time that the sound of a gun rang out through the house as a bullet tore through the head of Dr. Clark, causing her blackened brain matter to splatter across the wall beside her, along with a mist of black that swirled about her wounds. Dr. Clark let Jenna go and turned to find a fairly old but still very fit woman holding a rather large revolver in her hand. She had gray hair and wore a tactical vest with holsters for her revolver and other weapons, a shotgun at her back, a second handgun at one hip, and a machete at the other.
"This is for Raybob. Get the fuck out of his house,"
the woman yelled as she fired another shot square through the face of Dr. Clark, causing what was left of her head to explode with rot. Dr. Clark then burst into smoke and vanished away into nothingness, leaving the group once again.
"Are you all right?"
the older woman asked Jenna.
"Yes, thank you,"
Jenna replied with gratitude.
"Which one of you is Gunnar Walden?"
the woman asked.
"Why did you come here?"
She questioned further. "I'm Gunnar Walden, and I think we can stop all of this, Gunnar replied.
"You can't stop it. I thought I stopped it once, but then more people were killed, and I got more people killed. Never again."
The woman informed them.
"You need to leave,"
she demanded. "No, Shiloh. We need to see this through to the end." Gunnar abstained.
"We need to leave. Now,"
Shiloh demanded as she headed for the door.
Wait, how did you get here?
Asked Makenzie, who was shocked a weird look from Shiloh.
"I drove here. My car is outside."
Shiloh answered the girl, still glaring at her.
"But the road was flooded. We couldn't even make it across in a truck."
Cole spoke up.
"The road was clear when I drove through."
Shiloh answered.
There's no way for the water to have cleared out that quickly,
Jack said. She controls the water, Gunnar said quietly.
What?
Jack asked. She let Shiloh in. She wanted her here, Gunnar clarified.
She won't let us leave.
"We will make it out of here. There's nothing for you to worry about,"
Shiloh said with a smile, as if she knew something that the rest of the group didn't.
"We were gonna head over the mountain before that thing showed up. We should probably try to get out of here,"
Jenna asked. I think we can stop them. We just need to follow the directions that Todd Jacobs left us in his journal, Gunnar said.
How do you expect we do that?
Shiloh asked.
I climbed up this mountain half dead and gave the bitch her daughter's bones, but something brought her back. Something went wrong. The bones were stolen from her, and how they are scattered to the winds. The curse won't end.
She explained. I believe that if we can't end the curse as a whole, then we have to destroy each monster that the lake has created. Because if we don't, I fear that something much, much bigger, much worse is to come. Something we won't be able to stop. Gunnar pleaded. Something is coming, Shiloh. He finished.
How could anything be worse than what we're already up against?
Seth asked. There are things in this world that are beyond our understanding. This is part of something bigger than we know, Gunnar said.
I'm going to find a way out of here. I suggest you come with me,
Shiloh said to Makenzie before looking to the other teenagers. They were given no time to decide what to do next. The massive figure of Casper Stoical broke through the rotten side wall of the house as if he were a certain children's drinking mascot. Ironically, he did bring out a red liquid when he ripped open a broken board from the wall and lodged it into the chest of Jenna, the young girl that had just narrowly escaped death. She was not so lucky this time. The broken, splintering, mold-covered piece of wood pierced her lung, and she quickly spit up blood as she fought to pull herself away from the old couch that she was now pinned to. But she could not catch a breath, and she quickly fell limp upon the dingy sofa, her legs dangling off the edge as she slumped over with a piece of jagged wood stuck through her. Everyone else fled from the house and into their vehicles to escape the nightmare that pursued them. The waters flooded the road once more, so there was only one way to go. Back toward camp. But instead of going back to the camp, the teens drove their truck further up the hill, and Shiloh followed with a car full behind them. Eventually, they reached the end of the road, where the muddy path stopped near to an old, run-down mansion. The place was in complete disarray. Windows were smashed out, the roof had caved in places, and the front door hung off its hinges. Before anyone could object, the truck that contained Jack, Makenzie, and Seth pulled in alongside next to the house and stopped. Shiloh pulled in after them and jumped out of her car to go talk to them. Gunnar followed quickly thereafter.
We gotta go over the mountain,
Shiloh said.
Come on, we can't stop here,
she demanded. I'm afraid she's right. We really shouldn't stop here, Gunnar spoke up.
This shit crazy. I can't believe this is happening,
Jack yelled. We need to go, Gunnar said. Jack took a few breaths in an attempt to calm himself before agreeing that that was their only option, and throwing the truck into reverse in order to go back the way they had come. But when he attempted to back up, the truck's tires would not grip in the deep mud that surrounded them. Jack tried and tried, but no matter how much he laid on the gas or rocked the truck back and forth, he could not gain traction, and his tires just spun in the thick mud. They were stuck there. Shiloh quickly suggested that they all pile into her car so that they could flee, but just like with the truck, her car too was incapacitated by the mud. They could not escape, so they opted to go inside of the dilapidated mansion to get out of the now torrential downpour of rain, despite Gunnar's objections. The lot of them were soaked from head to foot. They were cold, they were tired, and they were in constant fear for their lives. This was their church. Or rather, it sits on top of their church, Gunnar said as he looked around the once ornate building that had fallen into great disrepair.
Whose church?
Jack asked. The cult of Locusts. They worshipped the lake and the monsters it created. It was as if they were gods to them, Gunnar answered.
Sounds like they're pretty sick, huh?
Lillian said. Yeah, and that's precisely why I'm so afraid of what they sought. Gunnar continued. They planned for so many things. They believed that something bigger was to come, to recreate the world, and they sought to usher it in. That's what I've been trying to tell you. That's what we need to stop by any means necessary, Gunnar explained, the sound of fear in his voice.
What exactly were they trying to do?
Gunnar began, but it was interrupted by an odd sound that seemed to move through the house. It was like a weird crackling or crunching sound, a kind of rattling that seemed to creep closer. They knew that something was coming toward them, and they all froze in fear, listening to the sound that was similar to constantly cracking knuckles and popping bones. Then the source of the sound emerged from the living room to the right. A long and slender creature clung to the wall, its bone-like fingers dug into the wall to hold itself in place. The thing looked like a man, but it wasn't really. It was more like the twisted visage of what once could have been a man. Its skin a pale white beneath a rot-stained, long red coat of torn fabric, over top of torn rags of clothing that covered the beast. The thing's arms and legs were several feet long, longer than any man's limbs could be, and it was as thin as a skeleton, its face matching the appearance. Eyes like hollow sockets in a skull, skin stretched tightly over it, but the monster's teeth were long, set within receded and dried-out gums. The teeth were all jagged and broken to form a row of fangs that resembled that of a rusty old saw set within its mouth. The group of them all scattered, some running through the house and some outside, all of them separating to flee from the starving monster. Gunnar and Cole fled into the basement where they heard the sounds of gunshots from back upstairs, followed by yelling and screeching, and then more gunshots. And then all fell silent. The two of them looked at each other fearfully before they too gathered whatever they could to defend themselves, and it was while they were looking for some weapons that Gunnar noticed the thick metal hatch door that now hung off its hinge at the side of a large hole in the wall that had once covered a hole with a ladder that led down into total darkness.
You think that's the way out?
Cole said quietly. You don't want to go down there. That's where it lives. We wouldn't last down there very long at all. Not to mention the fact that the ladder looks like it could crumble at any moment, Gunnar informed him.
How do you know that?
Cole asked. That's where they kept it, Gunnar answered.
Like some kind of sick pet?
Cole asked. More like a minotaur in a labyrinth. A very hungry minotaur, Gunnar replied. Then the crackling continued once more, and before the two of them could decide whether or not to brave the ladder and the darkness below, the redcoat was upon them. The creature lunged from the top of the stairs, pouncing onto Cole as if it were a predatory cat. Cole struggled against the creature, and despite him being a mass of pure muscle, and the creature on top of him being nothing but mere skin and bones, the beast in the red coat held a supernatural strength that allowed it to slowly overpower the weakening Cole Kaiser, who used every ounce of his strength to not become the next meal of this starving creature. He felt its icy breath upon his cheek, and smelled the stench of rot from within the beast's gut, as its teeth chomped at him, snapping shut mere centimeters from his cheek, turning his head away in a desperate attempt to stay as far away from it as possible. Cole feared that all was lost, and that he was going to die as a meal for a monster. But just as he was about to lose strength, Gunnar charged forward. Yelling all the while, he wrapped his arms around the redcoat's neck from behind and held on tight as the beast flailed about to throw him off. Gunnar ripped the old bone necklace from his neck and stuffed his hand into the beast's large, gaping mouth, forcing the charm down the thing's throat before it was finally able to throw Gunnar from its shoulders. Gunnar and Cole then watched as the pale, starving thing in the red coat began to flail around, attempting to stand or crawl away, only to flop violently onto the floor. The creature screeched in pain as it fell to the floor repeatedly with loud, hard thuds. It gripped at its neck and chest, clawing into its own skin and tearing away its own flesh to get at the intrusion lodged within its airway. The thing finally fell onto the ground one last time, still gripping at its chest, and then it fell limp. Fingers still dug into its own flesh, buried into its own ribcage. Then the smell of burning flesh began to fill their nostrils as the thing's chest began to cave in and melt away, to form a large hole of burning, decaying flesh that made Cole and Gunner both sick to their stomachs, causing them both to exit the basement as quickly as possible, looking back once more as they reached the top of the stairs to see the thing's skin collapsing as if the bones underneath had just given way over the weight of the skin above them.
Is it dead?
Cole asked in shock of what he had just witnessed. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is, Gunner replied, also in shock himself.
How did you... What did you...
Cole asked, not really knowing the words to use to figure out exactly what just happened. That necklace was tucked into the book when I found it, Gunner replied. I'm pretty sure it was one of the bones of the native girl, but I wasn't positive until now, Gunner said with a bit of a chuckle.
So, you stuck your arm down that thing's throat on a hunch?
Cole asked. Yeah, I guess so, Gunner answered.
That's crazy, but I'm glad you did. Oh man, am I glad you did. Thank you.
Cole praised Gunner while hugging him. The two of them then quickly came to the realization that the others were possibly in danger, which sent them running up the stairs to find some sign of what happened to their friends, whether it be good or bad. They found the walls filled with bullet holes and tables and furniture flipped over on the floor. The place was turned upside down, appearing as if a tornado had ripped through the house, even more so than when they had first arrived here. The only sign of what happened to the others was a small puddle of blood about 8 inches around, along with drips that trailed through the room before disappearing out into the rain and the darkness.
Well, it appears that evil may not be completely unstoppable after all. But will everyone survive? What other reveals wait to be discovered? Well, you won't have to wait too long. The follow-up to this story is well underway. But if you just can't wait, then stop back again next weekend and continue forward into the nightmare. And until then, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can catch you all again next Saturday.